Hi, I'm Lisa, a 30-year-old mother of two amazing kids. Before I dive into my story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to follow along with more tales from my life. Now, let's get into the heart of it. Living on property owned by my in-laws with my husband and our kids seemed perfect at first. It was one of those setups where you imagine big family dinners and cousins growing up more like siblings. But things took an unexpected turn when my brother-in-law, Mark, moved into the house next door with his wife and their three kids. Initially, it was just small favors, watching Mark's kids for an hour here and there. "Hey, Lisa, could you watch them while I run to the store?" Seemed reasonable at first, but as weeks passed, the favors became demands. "Just keep an eye on them this afternoon, will you? I've got errands." Mark's casual requests soon became a daily routine. One afternoon turned into every afternoon, and before I knew it, I was practically a full-time sitter, unpaid and exhausted. Even my own kids started to notice. "Mom, why are you always watching Uncle Mark's kids? Don't we do stuff anymore?" Each question broke my heart. I loved my nieces and nephews, but I missed my own kids. Our afternoons filled with little adventures and lazy picnics in the backyard. When I confronted Mark about it, the conversation didn't go as I'd hoped. "Lisa, you know we all have to pitch in. We live on family property. It's not just about you and your little family. We're all in this together, right?" His tone had a sharpness I hadn't expected. It felt less like a question and more like a warning. The implication was clear. My living situation was leverage he was ready to use. I tried talking to my husband about it. "Honey, I'm really struggling with the amount of time I'm spending with Mark's kids. It's becoming too much." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck anxiously. "I know, Lisa, but what do you want me to do? Mark is family, and he's right next door. Plus, Mom and Dad wouldn't want us to cause a stir." His words stung. Not only was I feeling overwhelmed and exploited, but now it seemed like I was alone in this struggle. Mark's demands were straining my relationship with my own children and my husband. I lay awake that night, the weight of my husband's nonchalance and Mark's entitlement suffocating me. I loved my family, but at what point did my duties to them outweigh my responsibilities to my own children and to myself? As the days passed, the strain grew. Each request from Mark added to an invisible barrier building between me and my sense of freedom. I needed a solution, a way to reclaim my life and ensure my children didn't feel like secondary characters in their own home story. But with every passing day, the answer seemed to slip further away, buried under familial obligations and the fear of upsetting a delicate balance that had never really favored me to begin with. "Come on, Lisa. It's just a few hours more each week. You're helping the family. Isn't that what we should all be doing?" Mark's words were smooth, but the edge behind them was impossible to miss. "You know we're tight right now, Mark. I've got my job. The kids have their schedules. I can't manage all this without something giving way. Look, if you can't prioritize what's important, maybe you shouldn't be here at all. I'm sure I can talk to Mom and Dad about this situation." His threat hung in the air, thick and heavy. The idea of being evicted because I couldn't meet his demands was absurd, yet terrifyingly possible. His words echoed in my head, a relentless reminder of the precarious thread our lives hung by. Later that evening, I tried to open up to my husband about it. He was tired, the lines on his face deeper after a long day. Mark mentioned talking to his parents if I don't comply with what he wants. Can you believe that? Using their house as leverage? He paused, the wariness in his eyes shifting to discomfort. "He's my brother. He wouldn't really do that, would he? Maybe it's just his way of nudging you to help more." "That's not a nudge. That's a threat. And why am I the only one who has to help more? Why doesn't he ask the same of anyone else?" He didn't answer, just shifted his gaze to the floor, a silent admission that left a cold dread settling in my stomach. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the reality of my situation became clearer. Days passed, and the tension grew. Conversations with Mark became a careful dance around landmines, each word measured, each sentence weighed for impact. "Why can't your wife help with the kids sometimes? Why is it always me?" Mark laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "Because she's busy with her new project, and you, well, you're just here, aren't you? Available and capable. Think of it as your contribution to our collective well-being. Being available doesn't mean I'm at your disposal, Mark. This is unfair to me or my kids." He shrugged, dismissive. "Fair is relative. Look, just think about it. What I said about talking to the parents, Maybe that'll help clarify things for you. Mark's threat was no longer just an implication. It was explicit, a sword dangling over my head. And with my husband's passive stance, the fight felt singularly mine to wage. That night, as I tucked my kids into bed, their innocent chatter about school and friends was a stark contrast to the weight of my adult burdens. I knew I had to find a solution. The idea of losing our home loomed large, but losing myself to Mark's demands was a cost too great. I needed a plan, something to shift the balance to give me back some control. But in the dead of night, with only the soft breathing of my children as company, solutions seemed as distant as the stars outside their window. As I stood in our cramped living room, the air charged with tension, Mark's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You do realize you're living under my parents' roof because of my goodwill, right? Think about where you'd be without that." His words stung, the implication clear and sharp. He was marking his territory, and in his eyes, I was nothing more than a tenant on borrowed time. "Your goodwill, Mark. We're family. It's supposed to be about support, not hanging debts over each other's heads." Mark sneered, his eyes cold. "Support? I'm supporting the whole family by letting you stay here. And how do you repay me? By complaining and shirking your responsibilities." The word responsibilities echoed mockingly. I felt a surge of anger, fed up with being treated like a pawn in his control game. Taking care of your children is not my responsibility, and using this house as leverage is low, even for you. He stepped closer, his voice lowering into a threatening whisper. "Think very carefully about your next steps, Lisa. This isn't just about you and me, it's about where your kids will grow up." The threat hung heavy between us. After he left, I sat down, my mind racing. The fear of eviction was real, but so was my resolve not to let Mark manipulate me any further. I picked up my phone, hesitating only a moment before dialing my friend Jenny's number. "Jenny, I need some advice, some serious advice." Jenny's voice was a lifeline. "What's going on, Lisa?" I poured out everything from Mark's threats to the crushing weight of dependency. "I can't live like this, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I need a way out." "You're smart and talented, Lisa. Have you thought about looking for a job? Something that could get you out of there?" The idea sparked a sliver of hope. "I've thought about it, but I haven't taken any steps yet. I guess I was hoping things would get better." "Hope's important, but it won't change your situation. You need a plan. Start job hunting seriously. Maybe look into some remote work that you can do while the kids are at school." Motivated by Jenny's encouragement, I spent the next few days scouring job listings and updating my resume. I found several promising leads, jobs that could indeed pave the way to financial independence and, more importantly, freedom from Mark's control. Each application I sent out felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my life. The fear of upheaval lingered, but the more I acted, the more empowered I felt. I wasn't just fighting for my autonomy. I was fighting for my family's future, and with each step, the path ahead became a little clearer, the shadows cast by Mark's threats a little less daunting. Armed with a notebook hidden in the kitchen drawer, I began documenting every interaction with Mark, every command he issued, every threat he muttered. It was meticulous, sometimes draining work, but each entry was a step toward my liberation. One sunny afternoon, while the kids played in the yard, I approached Sarah, Mark's usually quiet sister-in-law. "Sarah, have you ever felt overwhelmed by Mark's expectations?" I ventured cautiously. Sarah paused, glancing around before leaning closer. "Overwhelmed? More like drowning. It's always do this, do that. I sometimes wonder if he thinks we're his staff, not his family." I nodded, feeling a spark of alliance. "I'm trying to do something about it, Sarah. I'm documenting everything. If we ever need to stand up to him, really stand up, we'll need proof." Sarah's eyes widened slightly, then she nodded. "Count me in. It's high time someone did something. What do you need me to do?" "Just keep track of anything he says or does that feels off. Write it down and we can compile it." With Sarah's support, I felt a renewed vigor. Our clandestine conversations became regular snippets of solidarity that bolstered my courage. Encouraged, I reached out to other relatives. Subtly, I began weaving a network of the overlooked and underappreciated within our family. We shared stories, documented grievances, and a quiet rebellion started to form right under Mark's nose. Meanwhile, I intensified my job search. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, I scoured job boards and sent out applications. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, a call for an interview for a remote position that fit my skills and schedule perfectly. Thank you for considering my application. I'm very excited about the opportunity to contribute, I said during the interview, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. The interviewer's response was encouraging. We're impressed with your resume, Lisa. We think you'd be a great fit. When the job offer arrived via email, it felt like a lifeline thrown across stormy seas. The salary was more than enough to consider a move. I printed the offer, the paper tangible proof of a potential new beginning. That night, I laid the offer on the kitchen table, tracing the words with my fingers, allowing myself to imagine a life free from Mark's shadow. I planned out the next steps, budgeting, looking for a rental, and discussing the move with the kids. As the plan solidified, I felt a mix of fear and excitement, but above all, there was determination. I wasn't just plotting an escape for my own family, I was setting a precedent. Perhaps in doing so, I would light a beacon for others in my family, showing that Mark's control was not absolute, that change was possible. We were not just his pawns, we were players too, and it was our move. With a new job secured and my dossier of evidence thick with documented grievances, I called for a family meeting. It was time to bring everything into the open. As everyone gathered, the air was thick with tension, anticipation mingling with the faint hope of resolution. Mark, unaware of my newfound position, carried his usual air of authority. I've called this meeting because there are things we need to discuss as a family, I began, my voice stronger than I felt. It's about our family dynamics, about how we treat each other. Mark scoffed lightly. What is this? A therapy session? Come on, Lisa, what's the real reason we're here? Ignoring his remark, I continued pulling out my notes. It's about fairness, respect, and boundaries, things that have been sorely lacking. I looked around, meeting the eyes of my family members. Many of us have felt overshadowed by Mark's demands and expectations. It's time we address this. One by one, I read the entries from my notes, instances where Mark had overstepped, times he manipulated our dependencies for his gain. The room grew quieter with each example, the weight of the words settling around us. Then, unexpectedly, Sarah spoke up. Lisa's right, I've felt it too. Mark, you've been taking us for granted, using our gratitude for this home to control us. Others chimed in, their voices tentative but growing in confidence. The grievances poured out, not with anger, but with a plea for change. Mark looked around, the realization dawning that his usual tactics wouldn't work this time. I didn't realize you all felt this way. I thought we were just functioning as a family. It's not functioning if it's only working for you, I said, my tone steady. We need to find a balance where everyone feels respected. The discussion that followed was long overdue. We talked about expectations, responsibilities, and most importantly, respect. By the end, the family dynamic had shifted perceptibly. Mark, faced with the collective voice of the family, had to acknowledge his overreach. In the weeks that followed, I prepared for our move. The decision to leave was bittersweet, filled with the promise of independence but tinged with the sadness of change. We found a small house, not far, but far enough to start anew. On moving day, as I looked back at the house that had been both a haven and a prison, I felt a surge of relief. Mark was there too, quieter, his usual bravado dimmed by the family's stand. We're starting over, Mark, I said, not unkindly. Maybe now you'll rethink how you treat people. He nodded, the gesture small but significant. As we drove away, the weight of years seemed to lift. We were moving towards something new, something ours. And back at the old house, a family was learning to rebuild not just their relationships, but their understanding of each other. Now that our story has ended, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Should family property ever be used as leverage in personal conflicts? Drop your opinions in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel.